Welcome to Creating Cooperative Kids, a show for parents and professionals interested in raising cooperative and confident children. I'd like to welcome our newest viewers watching us on the Coldwater School Community Access Channel in Coldwater, Michigan. They join the thousands now watching the show on the public access channels in hundreds of communities across the country. Now on today's show, we're going to meet several authors and learn about how food ingredients affect children. We're also going to learn about EFT, or Emotional Freedom Technique tapping, for kids to help them with negative emotions. All that and more on today's episode of Creating Cooperative Kids. Storytelling is said to be an ancient technology dating back 10,000 years. Now, as a child, I borrowed my parents' Super 8 silent movie camera to do my storytelling on film, using my siblings and pets as actors. Now, many of us drew pictures as a child or made up creative stories that had us daydreaming we'd be an artist one day. Well, one man also had that childhood experience, but his dream came true. Jeff Mack is the author and illustrator of over 20 children's books, chapter books, and early readers, including the James Howe Bunnicula and Friends series. His book, Aha, was voted one of the New York Public Library's best books of 2013. Jeff illustrated author Eve Bunting's Hurry Hurry book, which was voted the School Library Journal's best books for 2007. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Bill. Great to be here.
You've lived the kind of dream that a lot of people dream of, because I think it goes back to our early days. Being able to write and publish and illustrate a book was huge because the technology was so primitive back then. Now it's so much easier, but we're still in the mindset that if you can write a book, wow. And so a lot of us, you and I and others, have taken that advantage and taken that path. That you've turned your little boy dreams into writing and illustrating. Did one happen before the other?
Oh, between writing and illustrating, let's see. I think the illustrating probably came first for me. I mean, I always liked to draw pictures. Usually I would draw the things that scared me the most when I was a kid. I loved monsters, and I would practice drawing pictures of monsters, and I always had a tough time, but my dad would give me a hand. He'd sort of show me how to draw Dracula's face, and I'd practice it, and after a while got a lot better at it.
So a lot of people that like to know, how did you get your start? Because they're always looking at, all right, what do I need to do to set the stars in formation here? So can you, and just real quickly, how did you get your start with your first book?
Oh, with my first book. Okay, let's see. Because I think the first start came back in second grade.
No, I'm talking about being
published. The
Yeah.
actual book. So I had rented an apartment in New York, and at the time, publishing companies had drop-off days where I could bring a portfolio. I had written my own book, and I had done all the paintings for it, and I had made color photocopies and made them into a book. And I brought them to these different publishing companies, and I left the portfolio for them to be reviewed. And if they liked what they saw, then they would call me in for a meeting. So I made a lot of appointments, and I went in and met with different editors and art directors, and eventually started to get jobs to illustrate other people's stories, including one of the first ones I got to illustrate was James Howe's Bunnicula series, an early reader series. Yep. And then that gradually led to me getting to meet some other editors, and they were interested in some of the things I had written, and then eventually got to start publishing some of the things that I had written, as well as just illustrating.
So you got the break. Now, I'm holding Good News, Bad News. Now, is this one of the more recent books that you put out?
It is, yep. So that just came out a little over a year ago, almost 2 years now, yep. And that's an interesting book that has a very simple title, and actually the entire book is told with just those words, good news, bad news.
My next question is going to be, what kind of message is in your book, and what kind of substance for kids. But let's find out.
Okay.
You brought along with you a clip, which is a book trailer for this book. So I'll ask my crew to cue that up, and let's take a look at your book trailer for Good News, Bad News.
Yeah, okay.
Bad news.
Good news!
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 An instructive and entertaining primer on the art of friendship and the complexity of joy.
Flat out hilarious! Good news!
Bad news.
By Jeff Mack
Available now.
from Chronicle Books.
I love, well, and it's probably what the publishers liked. What I loved is it's simple,
Right.
just a few words for
Right.
children who are early readers, but it's powerful because I think you're introducing the readers at that point to, you can see things in a good way, you can see things in a bad way, right?
Exactly, and
Well, so what
everything, all of these sequence, the whole thing is in sequence, so everything's connected. So if it wasn't for the bad thing happening, you wouldn't have the good thing that happens.
And then
following.
I'm holding, this is a version of the book that was in Japanese?
That's Chinese.
Chinese?
That's Chinese, but it is in Japanese. It's in it's in 13 different languages now.
13 different languages.
Yeah, yeah. But it's
Man.
it means the same thing in every language. So.
And that's, looking at or speaking to authors, it's one thing to get published, but to be in 13 different languages, because the 13th one was just recent, right? Mm-hmm. Was just added? Which was
Yep.
the 13th
That-
country that was
the
added?
13th actually was the Japanese version.
Japanese,
Yeah,
that was just
yeah,
added.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, you got a great publisher behind you.
Thanks, they've been great.
Now, tell us a little bit about AHA.
Sure,
You
okay.
showed this in the beginning coming onto the show.
Right, so this followed up Good News, Bad News. With Good News, Bad News, the point was I wanted to reduce the story to just the essentials so that the words didn't repeat anything that you already saw in the pictures. They only helped you understand what you were looking at in the pictures. So with AHA, I thought, how can I make this story even simpler? If I only have the words Good News, Bad News in this one book, how can I make this one even simpler? I wanted to focus on just the emotions of the characters in this book. So this is a story about a frog who is trying to have a peaceful day in the swamp, but he is chased from by one animal from one scene to the next. And every time he thinks he's in a safe place, like on the back of a log or on a rock, it turns out that he's actually in danger, and the log turns out to be a crocodile. And the entire story is told just with combinations of those letters, A and H. So if he feels like he's safe, he can be like, ah. And then when the sinister crocodile pops his head up, he says, aha, like he's almost got him. And then he jumps away and he says, ah. So that's that book. So it has a little bit of a cycle of life story, but it all works out in the end. It's pretty safe.
I
in the
see.
end. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. This one looks a little bit different. It's called The
Very
Things
different.
I Can Do.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Is this for older children?
I would say it's for kindergarten age children. It's, kids are still learning to read, but I wanted to make a book that looked at readers as authors as well. One day I was at the post office and I saw this little girl trying to open the door, and her dad was standing behind her. And she was pulling on this door and she had the hardest time opening it, And he was going to help her, and then she's like, no, I can do it. And you could see he was stuck. Does he help her or does he not help her, And he was obviously in a hurry and he needed to get going, but he wanted her to do it herself. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if I had a book about a kid who makes his own book, writes and illustrates his own book, and he's bragging about all the different things that he can do. But you can see in his pictures that he can't quite do everything that he's saying he can do. So if he's telling you he can take his own bath, he's actually in the kitchen sink with the soap and the plates and everything all over the place. So And everything is made with collage items from a kid's art kit. So there's nothing, no materials in here that a kid couldn't use themselves to make their own book if they really wanted to.
That's interesting. Now, I can see where you got the inspiration for this book, but where did you get the inspiration for the books like Aha and Good News, Bad News?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. Good news, bad news. Well, let's see. One day, I was trying to make some ice cream, and the ice cream came out lousy. So that was bad news, but I realized there was a place in town that had some soft serve ice cream, so that was the good news. So I went there, but it turned out that their soft serve machine was broken that day. So that was the bad news. So then I realized that they also had chocolate cream pie that I'd never had, and I tried that, and it turned out to be the best chocolate cream pie that I'd ever had. So I traced it all back, and if it wasn't for this really hot day where I was trying to make my own ice cream and that whole thing going badly, I wouldn't have actually found the best chocolate cream pie that I've ever had.
And do you do readings to children?
Oh yeah,
You must.
I do. I visit a lot of schools. And talk about writing and illustrating. I read my stories. Encourage kids to pursue their own creative ambitions, whether it's writing, drawing, music, anything like that. Tell them, nothing ever happens right the first time. You just got to keep practicing at it. You learn from your mistakes. If you really want to do something well, it just takes lots and lots of practice, but it's worth it.
So as a fellow author, my question for you is, do you get those readings on your own, or does your publisher help you out with that?
Oh, most of them I get on my own. I
Really?
am on some of my publishers' sites as listed as an author who you can have come to invite to come and speak at your school. But most of the school visits that I do are on my own. Yep.
All the books, and you've got over 20 that you've either written or illustrated.
I think I just finished my 26th book. Yep.
Wow. Are all of them published by a publisher? Have you self-published any of them?
No, I haven't self-published anything. Everything I've done is through different publishers, many different publishers that I've worked with. Yep.
Have you thought about self-publishing, or you just like the route that you've gone?
I really enjoy working with editors.
Yeah.
I really appreciate their input. Even though I might have a really strong sense of what I want to do,
Yeah.
I look for an editor who shares an understanding of what I want to do, and then that editor can give me such an excellent, helpful, objective point of view on what I'm trying to do. They can help me hone my vision and make it that much stronger. So I really appreciate their input, and I wouldn't get that with self-publishing.
Just one last question.
Sure.
When you illustrate, what do you do it in? Is it watercolors or markers? What do you use?
All different materials.
Really?
My earliest books, I started out working in acrylic paint on watercolor paper, and that works out just fine for certain styles of books. The point is I want to get the style of the illustration to match the tone or the mood of the story. So a soft technique, like my earliest book, Hush Little Polar Bear, was about a dreaming polar bear, and it has a very soft, painterly quality. Later on, books like Aha, very loud, bold. I want a more graphic style, so I used digital computer to illustrate this.
Well, listen, Jeff, this has been wonderful, giving us a peek into a children's book author and illustrator. Thank you so much
Thanks.
for coming
Thank
out.
you, Bill.
I
This
wish
was great.
the best to you, and I hope
Thank
children all over the world are going to read your books.
Hope so too. Thanks.
Drawing and writing are two activities that experts say relieve stress, but what if you need something more and you need it for your children? Now, in my next segment, we're going to explore something called EFT tapping, and they say it's not just for adults. Don't go away. We'll be right back after the short break.